Welcome to the 2018 fantasy football season. I'm your commissioner, Brent Hesse, alongside me, league member Joe Prestigiacomo. We're here to talk about a mock draft that is going to put both of us in the perspective of each of our league members in order to try to figure out what we project them to do through the early rounds of our fantasy draft coming up here in just a couple days.
Prestigious league member Joe Prestigiacomo. Illustrious league member.
He does have a long career in the league.
Long career.
But not much to show for it.
Record, we don't have to talk about that.
Record of most losses
long
in
career. Long career is important. I have staying power.
You do.
I have veteran experience in the league.
You've been close to the chopping block a couple times, but you managed
but never got chopped. That's important. You ever watch the show Chopped? The guy that sticks around the longest eventually wins. That's the premise of that.
We'll see if you can do that, because there's a bunch of other people that have been here a long time and have at least something to show for it.
Yeah, like Mitch
Robbie
Gordon.
Burns, two-time league champion. Mitch is sitting right there pretty with you. That's the thing, is like it's just hard to decide which one we'd kick off first between you and Mitch. So we just leave you both.
So you're starting with the odds. I'm starting with the evens. We're just going to go through all 12 members of this terrible league to decide who's drafting what.
So the first overall pick is Mason Hubler's, and I expect Mason to be a little bit of a homer this year and
easy.
Lead with Zeke Elliott.
Easiest pick
at the number
I've
one
ever
spot.
seen. Everyone knows
Elliott
he's taking Zeke.
Has obviously impressed a lot in his first couple years in the league.
He's impressed a couple bruises.
Yeah. Last year he did have some suspension problems, but whenever he got back in the fold, he played well, and that's not a bad pick at all, especially in a standard scoring league. You can't really go wrong with any of those top backs at first overall, so I expect Mason to take Zeke at 1.
Yeah. Next up, we got league bottom feeder Brock Hayden. It doesn't really matter.
Defending champion / league bottom feeder Brock Hayden.
That's important to clarify. And it doesn't really matter what he's going to draft here, because he's going to end up trading this pick for like 5 bench players that he turns into 2 of like Noah's picks, like his round 1 and round 2. So it doesn't really matter here, but I see him, just because he's always thinking about trade value, going with what most people agree is the most valuable player in the league right now. I'm projecting Brock takes Le'Veon Bell with the second pick overall, just because that's the most valuable, consistent player.
So next is Austin Happel at the 3 spot, and Le'Veon, if Le'Veon goes 2, I think it's pretty clear Happel will go ahead and grab Todd Gurley, the safe pick here. A player that dominated fantasy football last year and helped countless owners to the championships in leagues across the country. Todd Gurley. Can he have as much production as last year? No, but even if he regresses a little bit, he could still finish as a top back or one of the highest backs. He's going into his 4th year, so still in the prime of his career. Todd Gurley's a good and obvious pick if he's still there at 3.
Yeah. Obvious pick. Now, we can't always give Happel the benefit of the doubt that he makes the smartest choice, because it is Austin Happel, and he probably will not be in 100% sober mindset at this point in the draft. But I can't say, much different for any of the rest of us. So, yeah, I think Gurley's a solid pick here. Next pick is Mr. Eric Day. This one's an interesting one because Eric has a pretty solid record in this league so far of being eccentric in his drafting strategy,
but somehow still ends up finishing it high in the standings.
We don't know how.
It's kind of like the Zach Flanagan effect all over.
The Zach Flanagan effect. There's always one. But I guess I give Eric the benefit of the doubt here and assume that he's going to pick and this is where it gets kind of murky, because I could see 3 or 4 different players going here.
I see 2.
Two definitely. I think there's an argument for 2 others, but 2 very solidly is a coin flip here. But I'm going to go ahead and assume that Eric... You know what? Hot take. Eric takes Antonio Brown with the 4th overall pick because I see further into the draft him picking up somebody that would balance this roster out after taking Antonio Brown. So I'm going to go ahead and say Antonio Brown, write it down, Eric's 1st round pick.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a surprise, but I kind of agree with you. I would not be shocked to see Eric go with AB there. Obviously, AB's been the top receiver in fantasy the last 3 years, and there's a high likelihood that he finishes in top 5 again, whether it's number 1 overall or somewhere, but it'll return good value. But that does leave Van Walker with the 2016 star. That's David Johnson coming off of a broken arm, but he should be fully healthy, and he dominated his last healthy season. So anybody that's able to get him at 5 has to be very happy about that.
It's absolutely absurd that David Johnson is going 5th overall in this draft. I think any injury concerns are mostly unfounded at this point. He's coming back 100%. Behind, in a Cardinals offense that we don't really know what they're going to look like coming out of the gate with, a big question mark at quarterback as far as talent goes. There's no stopping David Johnson.
Yeah, he's just so talented.
Yeah,
he'll make do in it. Well, he's still in the category for going first or second in some people's opinions. But
oh yeah, easily. I would not blame anyone picking David Johnson at 1st overall, but we know that's not going to happen with Mason. So here he falls at number 5. Next up is quite the character, Noah Gallegos, Noah G. No one really knows what's going on in the mind of Mencia at this point. He's been talking a lot about how he's going to take Saquon. I believe him up to a point. I feel like with Noah's deadpan delivery of his jokes and his speech, you never really know if he's being serious or not. But I think the logical pick here is Saquon. I can't see him going too crazy. I think Noah plays it by the book more than he likes to let on. So I'm going to go ahead and put Saquon down here at Noah's pick 1st round. If he goes in a different direction, depending on what it is, if he takes Nuck, if he takes, I don't know, Melvin Gordon, I wouldn't hate it, but I'm going to go ahead and pencil him in for Saquon.
I'm going to give Mitch the player that Noah was talking about before Saquon really burst on the scene in preseason. That's Alvin Kamara.
Okay.
Mitch, it's Mitch Gordon, so you don't ever really
How many buys does Kamara have?
Yeah, you don't really have a great grasp on what he's going to do. But Kamara had a hell of a year last year as a rookie, and when you just look at the totals and the fact that Mark Ingram is out for the first couple weeks, he should get more touches. I think Mitch is smart enough to realize that Kamara's talent is just high enough to where it's a good pick. Obviously, like you mentioned, there's a couple other running backs as well as some receivers that could start coming off the board here. So I think he could go a number of different ways, but I expect Kamara, just because how incredible he was when he was on the field last year, that Mitch recognized that and he wants that kind of talent on his team.
You gotta hope he does have that kind of intelligence. But given his past record, I don't know if it's really a problem with intelligence, more of apathy. One thing we do know for sure is it's going to be hard for him to get centered in this draft, going back and forth between the kegs, serving us up beers.
That's going to be one of the challenging things to have to manage, and no one's ever had to do that before, so it'll be very interesting to see how he
Mitch Gordon is, in fact, the beer bitch of 2018
just
in the Fantasy League draft.
That's great.
See you there, Mitch. I'll be expecting a nicely poured brew upon entering, so can't wait to see you there. Next up, we've got League Commish sitting right next to me, Brent Hesse, the 1 and 2 on the mic. Brent, one thing that is making me write this name down for you is earlier this preseason, around July, we had this discussion in the group chat about drafting strategy, and I brought up the point that as crazy as it seems with all of the wide receiver depth and all of the good running backs going off the board this year, taking a wide receiver round 1 is not as crazy as it looks, and I got a lot of positive feedback from you on that point. And seeing as that Antonio Brown is already off the board, the only other logical conclusion that I can put here is that you will be taking DeAndre Nuck Hopkins, possible wide receiver 1 at the end of the season. He's got this beautiful connection with Deshaun Watson that we didn't get to see fully last year, but it blew him up into what was easily like the best years he's had. I know you like him as a player. You scammed quite a few times for him in past seasons. So I'm going to write down DeAndre Hopkins here for you.
Hopkins is a major talent, and the connection between Watson was something we've never really even seen before. I definitely have considered Hopkins at that spot in my mock drafts and things like that, so I respect the pick, and it's definitely one of the avenues I could take on draft day. For you, Joe, like you mentioned, I think wide receivers, especially at the top, are hard to come by. And one guy that I think is even more of a talent and more consistent than Hopkins is a player by the name of Odell Beckham Jr. And he'll be healthy again this year. I expect him to have a great season. So
that's an
with
interesting.
that, I think there will be 2 wide receivers going off the board in back-to-back picks.
I do like OBJ. I do like the rejuvenated Giants defense. You never know. I mean, I've done quite a few mocks where Odell's my first pick off the board, so I respect that. I think that's a decent call for me. It depends on who's already off by that point, but yeah, that's not bad at all. Next we got Wilson, who's actually sitting here at the end of the couch with us. Say what's up, Wilson. Yeah, all right.
That's what I like to hear, Will.
Wilson is one thing I love about Wilson is when he shows up to draft day, he's a fucking operator. Dude shows up sober, serious, not sober for a while, but sober for the first couple rounds. Serious. He's not chatting up. He's not doing riffs. He's looking at the ADP sheet, figuring out who he's going to take, and I think this is probably one of the better, most intelligent takes you could take around 10. I'm going to write him down. Leonard Fournette, I think, is where Wilson goes at this point in the draft if he's still here. And seeing as he is an RMOC, I think Wilson has the intelligence to assess who the best value is here. He could gamble that Fournette would still be there on the wraparound, but Ben Sherrody and Robbie Burns are also cold intellects, and they might take him before.
Yeah,
so.
Very interesting. All 3 of those people at the end of the draft are former champions.
Yep.
So
yeah, they know what they're doing. So I think
them to at least have a strategy going in. But if Fournette goes off the board there, I think Ben was probably looking at a wide receiver going into this pick, but I don't think he can pass up the opportunity of Kareem Hunt still there, last year's leading rusher and running back 4 on the season, still being there at 11. So I think Ben would jump at the opportunity to snag Kareem Hunt and leave a couple wide receivers on the board and hope that one gets back to him his next pick.
I think that's a solid pick. It really is a toss-up between Hunt and Fournette. I don't know who Wilson likes more, but I think both are looking at about similar levels of production. They're both playing on high-powered offenses, so I think if one goes at Wilson, the other one goes at Ben. Next up, we've got Robbie Burns. Now, Robbie, you never really know where he's going. Last year plagued with injuries, but I think where Robbie might be heading this year...
You get to project both of his 2 picks.
That's true. Robbie does have the advantage of being the 12th pick, getting the back-to-back. So he might... With who's left on the board, I can see him going for 2 potentially top 5 in their position, skill position players in Dalvin Cook and Julio Jones. I think are solid picks for him here. He gets what are potentially top 5 players in their positions. Dalvin Cook went on an absolute tear before falling to an injury last year. And Julio Jones, who's been plagued with injuries the past couple years, hasn't been performing to his usual legendary, iconic GOAT status.
Well,
but I think
it's crazy you say that when he's coming off a 1,400-yard season.
That's true. His problem is in red zone looks and touchdowns. 1,400 yards, obviously nothing to shake your head at, but I think you see an uptick in touchdowns. I don't think that's the new normal for him. So I'm going to go ahead and write down Julio Jones and Dalvin Cook for Robbie.
I think that's very likely there for good old Robbie Burns. Julio-Dalvin combo is very good start.
It's deadly. I mean, I love that.
And Ben here, with already having Kareem, he may be tempted to try to snag another running back. But I'm gonna say he goes try to balance out his first 2 picks this year and takes a guy that everybody likes a lot, and that's Michael Thomas, the lead receiver for the New Orleans Saints. He's had 2 historic years. He has more catches in his first 2 seasons than any receiver in NFL history. And now he's going into his 3rd year, and he's got the rapport with Drew Brees on lock, so he could have his best year yet. And Thomas is definitely somebody that this may be a little early for Thomas, but I don't think so. I think it's a very fair spot for him.
I think Ben could definitely see that Thomas isn't going to be there, obviously, on the entire wraparound. And by that time, the wide receiver elite talent has definitely thinned by the time it gets back to Ben. So I could see that. That's definitely a pick that I could see Ben not exactly reaching for, but definitely picking ahead of ADP. Wilson is up next, and I'm going to... This is an interesting play because Wilson still has quite a few elite names left to take off the board. But one thing that I've been seeing a lot in mock drafts around this area is we've been running with this theme of balancing out the picks. But what I think, with him still remaining on the board, what I think Wilson might see and jump on is the ability to go Melvin Gordon and wrap up 2 potentially top 5 running backs. Wilson is probably at one of the only spots capable of doing this. These are definitely people who are easily top 10, possibly top 5 running backs. So I can see Wilson jumping at the chance to solidify his running back core and then look for talent deeper in the draft for wide receiver.
Melvin Gordon, yeah, definitely a guy that fell a little bit in this mock. I could see Ben taking him here, but I decided to go with Michael Thomas instead, which leaves the running backs a little bit of a drop-off here. And while I'm not necessarily sure I expect you to do this, Joe, I'm going to have you start out with back-to-back wide receivers out of the draft just because I think the value is so much higher with Keenan Allen here as opposed to any other running back on the board. Keenan Allen finished so strong last year. And with the unfortunate news of the Hunter Henry injury, he will see so many targets from Phillip Rivers. If he can stay healthy, he could easily finish as the number 1 receiver across the board in fantasy this year.
Like I said, I was a proponent of the wide receiver early strategy that's been going around the fantasy community lately. And these are 2 elite wide receiver talents. I love Keenan Allen here. I could definitely see me, if I'm in this position, taking him at this point. So you've got what is possibly the number 1 receiver in the league in Nuck Hopkins. But what a lot of people aren't talking about is how far Devonta Freeman has slid down the ADP poll. And I think this is the most opportune time for you to grab a running back that you don't have to worry about. A sluggish Falcons offense after the departure of Kyle Shanahan has some people wondering if Devonta Freeman is going to reproduce his past couple of seasons as one of the best running backs in the league, but I think you at least have the foresight to know that he's still up there as far as production is concerned.
Definitely. That is a potentially explosive offense, and Freeman's been a consistent performer. If I was looking at having to pass on another running back, the running backs in the 3rd round at that point would be a considerable drop-off, so being able to obtain one of those top 12 RBs is a very important strategy. Now we got Mitch Gordon up, and so what Mitch likes to do sometimes, I feel like he's just a couple years behind. You know, his draft sheets, you know, they might not have the most up-to-date information. Some people here might think Adrian Peterson's still starting back. And a guy that has always had good name value and is still a very productive player and could have another great year, but is starting to crest that hill is A.J. Green. And he's going to be hopefully in an offense that's better than it was last year, with Mixon maybe being able to help out and carry some of the load. Also, he might be able to see more targets as well as with the release of Brandon LaFell. So A.J. Green could definitely have another great year. He's still only 30, so definitely not washed up by any means, but A.J. Green is the pick that I think Mitch makes here.
Yeah, I think that's probably where he's going to head to. If there's one thing I know about Noah, it's that this man has a burning passion for the quarterback Aaron Rodgers. He loves Aaron Rodgers more than anyone else I have probably ever met in my life. Dude cannot get himself enough of the Packers offense and Aaron Rodgers. So I am slating Noah to take what is probably going to be Aaron Rodgers' number 1 target this season, Davante Adams. A lot of hype coming around this character as of late. The dude is a volume machine. He loves getting open. As far as actually catching the ball once it's sent his way, we've seen some improvements in the past season or two, but there's still some question marks left in that area. But he's definitely slated for just tons of volume in this new Green Bay offense.
Yeah, Adams finished as a wide receiver 1 last year with Hundley throwing him the ball most of the year. And with getting Aaron Rodgers back, he always supports number 1 wide receivers. Obviously, Jordy Nelson being gone opens up the field so much for Davante Adams. The only real issue is last year the 2 players that were targeted most in the red zone in the whole entire NFL were Davante Adams and Jimmy Graham, and now they both play on the same team. So could Adams get a couple of those red zone targets eaten up by Jimmy Graham? It's possible. But Adams is definitely a viable pick.
And see, I don't think Noah knows that anyway. I don't think Noah is even aware of where Jimmy Graham is at this point, so I don't think that's really factoring in on this consideration.
Even if it is factored in, he's probably the best wide receiver available at this point.
Yeah,
So very good
definitely
pick.
that, yeah.
Now we've got Ben Walker up, who was able to get David Johnson to fall to him at 5th overall. I see Ben Walker just kind of making the first big move in the draft, and that is selecting a position outside of running back or receiver
Yep.
and going with the tight end Rob Gronkowski for the Patriots. Obviously, Gronk has been Brady's number one target for years now, and with the release of a bunch of notable wide receivers and the suspension of Edelman to begin the year, Gronk could get even more work than he's used to seeing, which is crazy to think about. If he could stay healthy, it could be his best year yet.
I absolutely agree there, and I love Gronk this late in the draft. This is the latest that he's actually ever been projected as far as ADP goes since he really came on the fantasy scene. And I think this is potentially, like you said, might be one of his best seasons yet. Now we come to Eric Day, and I don't think this is a pick that's a surprise to anyone, but may not exactly agree with ADP. We have Jordan Howard, the Bear, coming off the board here for well-known Bears fanatic Eric Day. I love Jordan Howard this season. I think he's getting slept on a lot because it's a new Bears offense, but Jordan Howard is a consistent producer, and I don't think Cohen, his backfield comrade, is really that much of a threat to his production.
I think they can both work together. I think they'll be on the
Absolutely.
field together a lot, and obviously Jordan Howard's more of a two-down back. I think that's an obvious pick if Howard's still there for Eric, and a very good one also. So no complaints there. Next up, we got Austin Happel, who went with Todd Gurley with his first overall pick. That leaves a couple options still on the table for him. I think Happel will want to just target the top receiver left on the board and one that has enormous upside as well, which is Mike Evans. He has been up and down with touchdowns through his first 3 years, but has had over 1,000 receiving yards in each of his first 3 years. He's a guy that you know what you're going to get from him, and he's just a tremendous athlete, and the whole entire Buccaneers offense should be funneled through him again like it was when they were successful and almost made it to the playoffs 2 years ago. I think Mike Evans is a solid low-end number one receiver, and that's what Happel's looking for here after getting the stud of the draft, Todd Gurley at 3. So Evans is a good compliment to him.
Next up, we've got Brock Hayden swinging all the way back here at the end of the second. A lot of the second-round talent, is thinned out, but there's still a couple heads that would make decent picks. But I think Brock is going to pick here someone I don't exactly agree with just because I've never been much of a truther for him. But this is somebody that Brock acquired early in the season last year and then proceeded to push on everybody for about 3 or 4 weeks until somebody was dumb enough to hit the
which
accept
one of the
button.
two you're thinking
I
of
think
right now.
you know who it is.
There's two of them.
It is Mr. Joe Mixon coming off the board for Brock Hayden. You're stuck again with him, Brock. You're the only person in this league that actually likes him. I, don't really see that much potential for him this year on a flimsy Bengals offense. He's obviously going to get the carries. I mean, Gio Bernard gets more carries than most people assume he does, but I think they try to push it early and often to Mixon in games. So he's definitely, the ADP isn't that off, but that's who I see Brock going with this year.
Now we got Mason, who's coming back. He gets 2 picks in a row here. I think Mason would like to couple Zeke with another solid runner and then try to get a high upside receiver. So I think Mason's going to start off with taking a second-year runner that didn't have as super amount of carries last year, but has some skill and talent, and the coaches love him and expect him to get a lot more work this year, and that's Christian McCaffrey in Carolina. While this is a standard draft, so he does lose a little bit of value based on all the receptions he's supposed to get, he still finished as a running back 2 in standard leagues last year. This year, he should get more work, so I think that's a good pick. And after Mason has his top 2 running backs solidified, he's going to have to look elsewhere. And this is where things get a little bit interesting because there's a bunch of different receivers that you could go with here. But the guy that I think Mason would target,
Who is he?
it's going to be Doug Baldwin, actually. Baldwin has always been consistent. He does have a little bit of an injury question mark right now, but he looks to be coming along fine and should be ready for week 1. So I'm going to say Mason goes for who he thinks is the best receiver available at this point. And I think he would look for Doug Baldwin, while there are certainly a couple other options that would be respectable there as well.
I think that's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. Now, this is going to be another one of my hot takes, and I don't know if Brock's going to do this or not, but I could definitely see him, being wily enough as enterprising and always looking for the best trade value out of his players, like we mentioned before. Most would expect Brock, after taking 2 running backs, to want to cover his bases, draft one of the many, top-end receivers hanging around this beginning of the 3rd round. But there's still one name that hasn't come down that I could see him either drafting and holding on to or using as trade value, and that is LaShawn McCoy. It's still available right here. 3 running backs. If Le'Veon, Mixon, and McCoy all pan out to their ceiling potential as RB1s, this would be one of the most solid running back cores in the league, but I can see him, wanting to flip out at least one of them for some higher talent. Knowing Brock, that's probably going through his head, so I could see him taking LaShawn McCoy here at the second pick of the 3rd round.
I could definitely see that. McCoy has a lot of questions tied to him right now, but
that's true. And you know what? Taking a look at Brock's team, not the most upstanding gentleman probably in the league so far. Joe Mixon and LaShawn McCoy. But Brock likes a little spice.
Yeah, he doesn't really worry about that. It's all about production, and all 3 of those guys could produce if LaShawn sees the field this year.
No morals, no ethics. Nothing about caring about the character of the player. These are all 3, top producing backs. So
now we got Happel up. I think Happel may decide to turn into a bit of a homer here in the 3rd round and snag his favorite team's star tight end, Travis Kelce from the Chiefs. Because Kelce had a great year last year, led all tight ends in receptions. Between him and Gronk, I think they're clearly the 2 top tight ends in the league. Kelce is getting a new quarterback this year with Mahomes throwing him the ball, but they've shown a good rapport so far in preseason and training camp, so I think Kelce is a viable pick here and sets off Happel very well at the tight end position.
Solid pick for Happel. Here comes Eric Day. I'm assuming around the 3rd or 4th round is where Eric starts to get a little dicey with his picks. A little risky is probably... I said eccentric earlier. I like the word eccentric for Eric Day's draft strategy. So I don't know what he would see in this guy, but I could see this being a name that he's going down the ADP list and he sees him. He says, I want him on my team. I need him on my squad. That is Amari Cooper. I don't really have a strong statistical foundation for this, but I'm getting a soul read here on Eric Day, and I think he likes... I think he just likes the name Amari Cooper. I think he would be entertained by how it sounds coming off the tongue.
And Cooper has been a big name. He always gets drafted fairly high. Has been disappointing thus far in his career overall, but now there's no Crabtree in town. If you believe in that Gruden connection, maybe this is the year where Carr to Cooper finally becomes...
Like I said, this probably isn't
the league by storm.
This probably isn't the optimal pick, but this is just where I see Eric kind of going off the rails.
It's not too bad.
It's not terrible.
It's definitely something that could pan out. Maybe it's a little bit riskier than some others, but definitely not the worst thing I've ever seen. Now we got Ben Walker, who has a couple good players on his team so far. He could go a number of different ways, but I think he decides to make the pick that just has the best value here. He doesn't have a wide receiver yet, but I think he's going to stay away from one more round since he does have Gronk. I think he goes with Jerick McKinnon. McKinnon got paid big time in the offseason for the 49ers and is expected to be their workhorse this season. He does have a bit of an injury right now, but he should be back in time for the start of the season. If he gets as many looks as they think he could and he's in that Shanahan offense, it could be very explosive. He could be this year's Todd Gurley.
So next up we've got Noah coming around again with the middle of the round 6th pick. Now, like I said before, one guy who's still on the board that Noah cannot get enough of, just loves this man more than most of his relatives, is Aaron Rodgers. He cannot get enough of Aaron Rodgers. I haven't seen Noah for a while, but every time I run into him, it's the first thing out of his mouth is, "Have you seen how Aaron Rodgers is playing this season?" So. Number 1 QB off the board, definitely number 1 QB in the league, according to Noah.
He's the number 1 quarterback in the league.
That is Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers, he's got the Aaron Rodgers Devontae Adams connection.
I think that's lethal. Another. Yep. And what will probably end up happening is that he trades both of them to Brock for Joe Mixon at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, if you just look down the roster at Noah's team and then at Brock's team and combine those into one super team, that will be Brock's team by the end of the year.
And then if you look down towards like round 10, round 11, people who are probably going to end up on the waiver wire by week 6, that will probably be Noah's team.
Now we got Mitch, and if I know anything about Mitch, it's that, he tries to stay local with his football. He can't really be worried about what's going on in California or New York. He knows that the Colts play on CBS, and that's about the only channel that he's got. So he's going to look for the Colts' number 1 player here, and that's T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton has been very up and down, especially last year without Andrew Luck. But Hilton does have a lot of upside and did lead the NFL in receiving yards 2 years ago. So while it is a homer pick and it's a typical Mitch pick, it's not a bad pick at all.
I think that is exactly who Mitch would be targeting at this point in the draft. Next up is probably the easiest pick that we have all night. Not coming off the board, I don't think, until around this point. And if you didn't pick him, I would. That is the Chiefs' number 1 receiver, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek is poised for probably one of the best seasons of his career, if not the best season. The man can do it all. He returns 100-yard touchdowns like it's, nobody's business. He's got one of the deepest, most accurate arms in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes, slinging him dragons all night. I see Tyreek doing big things this season.
A pick I would make, and especially given the landscape of the draft board, one that I would be very happy with if this was the case. And so for you, Joe, you don't have any running backs yet, and while there may be a little bit of a dip from the running backs on the board to the running backs available, it's time to take a running back. And the running back that has the most talent and upside available and may finally get a chance to be a workhorse this year is Derrick Henry.
Okay.
And that's the way I think I see you going here.
I have been a Derrick Henry truther as a devoted DeMarco Murray at the Titans owner for a couple seasons. I do love Derrick Henry. The dude is a fucking truck. Mm-hmm. There are some concerns with Deion Lewis stealing work, coming in as the primary pass-catching back from New England, but I think Derrick Henry definitely sees the 1 and the 2.
And whenever Henry has been given the opportunity to get 20-plus carries a game, he has performed very well.
Oh, absolutely.
As evidenced in the playoffs last season.
He is starting material, so I could definitely see me selecting him as my first running back off on the board. Next up, we've got Wilson with 2 solid running backs, probably the best running back core in the league besides Brock at this point. I think he's going to be aiming at the rest of the elite wide receiver talent that's on the board right now, and I think at this point we just have to look at Adam Thielen, who last season was just a monster production, and I could see that's pretty much. There's a couple more. There's his teammate Stephon Diggs, so I could see him grabbing Adam Thielen at this point.
And at this point, Ben Jay's probably at least a couple shots of Admiral deep. So
a couple is charitable.
He's going to be liking Wilson's pick here and going to want the other receiver in that roster, and that's Stephon Diggs, snagging him real quick. Diggs obviously had the big catch in the playoffs last year. Had a solid year, but could this be the year he finally breaks out and hits 1,000 yards and becomes a true wide receiver 1? I think Ben is going to take a chance there at the late 3rd round and see if that'll pay off for him.
Robbie is at this point looking, he hasn't broken out the Kraken yet. His draft is still going all right. And I think he's looking at the ADP list and he sees what is possibly the last solid workhorse left on the board in Alex Collins in Baltimore. Alex Collins has been vying to get a starting position, a starting slot, because Baltimore's backfield has been murky for the past couple seasons. And I think this is finally his year to show Baltimore what he can do.
Yeah, Collins had a great campaign once he got the starting role midway through last year. They didn't really address the running back situation too much. They do get Kenneth Dixon back from injury, and they have Buck Allen, but they do have a need for a big-time running back, and Collins could fill that void. Who do you think, Robbie?
Oh, right, he gets the wraparound. Yep, I've still got... Give him Zach Ertz. I mean, I think that's a solid pick. Zach Ertz, probably a top 5, maybe top 3 tight end this year. Was an absolute beast last year for the Eagles. Coming back off the Eagles' Super Bowl winning campaign, I think Ertz is in line for a lot of production under, eventually, Carson Wentz.
That's a good pick. That's the guy Ben wanted. Ben's yelling and cursing at Robbie right now.
Absolutely.
Taking another shot of Admiral. So now Ben's kind of scrambling a little bit. He may be a little flustered here. And go with the second rookie off the board, Royce Freeman.
I think that's a solid pick for Ben. I don't know if he makes that pick, but I think if he does, it would be one of his better strokes of genius. instead of just a stroke. Zach Wilson, I think he solidifies his receivers here. I don't think he returns to running back. I think he's pretty confident. His 2 running backs are going to do the job for him this season. So I think right now he's looking at a couple names, Landry, Cooks, Fitzgerald, and one name that I see that I just mentioned, Larry Fitzgerald. I think Wilson has the knowledge necessary to know that Fitzgerald is not washed up. No matter what, every year somebody wants to say that Larry Fitzgerald doesn't play like he used to, doesn't have it anymore, and he proves them wrong every year. So I think Wilson snags Fitzgerald here in the 4th round.
Now we got Joe back up. And somebody he's been in love with all offseason is a second-year player out of Clemson, Deshaun Watson.
Oh, okay.
And I see Joe taking Watson as a second quarterback off the board right here. He played phenomenal through 7 games last year as a rookie. Now he's going to be back with DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, amongst others. And I think Watson could be the MVP of the season this year if he plays anything like he did as a rookie. That would be great value for Joe in the 4th round, snagging the second quarterback off board.
That's definitely interesting. I was actually going to tag you with Deshaun Watson for that Nuck hookup, but it looks like you've got different plans in mind, or maybe you do want Watson. You're trying to throw us off your trail here. Who knows? You're needing running back depth, and it doesn't look like it's there right now, so I think you might just go ahead and bite the bullet, start the QB slide now that I've taken Deshaun Watson, and pick yourself up perennial powerhouse Russell Wilson, who has yet to have a bad season, really. He's not operating with a lot. He's got his receivers back, but he lost Jimmy Graham, and the O-line is still kind of shaky, so we're not 100% certain what the outlook is there, but I think you're trusting in Russell Wilson still being an elite talent.
And Wilson was one of my only bright spots on my fantasy team in the GOAT League last year.
Absolutely.
So
terrible team.
I would definitely
just awful.
Finish higher than you did. But I'd definitely be happy to have Russell Wilson back on my team this year. Thank you, Wilson. Now with the stone in hand, Mitch decides to go with Jay Ajayi, my nightmare from last year. But now getting the lead back for the defending Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. Ajayi is still a talented player, as he showed 2 years ago. He was impressive with the Eagles in a limited role. If he can get more carries this year, Ajayi could definitely help out Mitch's team. And I think that's a pick that's very likely, seeing as Mitch rolling with Alvin Kamara as his only back at this point.
I think that would be a solid pick for Mitch. One I'm not 100% certain he'll make, but one I would definitely appreciate. Next up, we've got Noah Gallegos. Now, I'm not looking at who's left. I'm not 100% sure, what's really going on in Noah's mind at this point. Would he take Tom Brady and have 2 elite quarterbacks just for the hell of it? Maybe. Fucking knows. So we never really know with a wild card like Noah. I've got a name here, Brandon Cooks. Cooks not exactly living up to his ADP and season hype last season, but I think he makes a bounce back this year. And, maybe Noah's just, picking names from a hat at this point. But you gotta hope he sees Brandon Cooks here.
Ben Walker doesn't have a receiver yet, and he's luckily able to still find a very viable wide receiver 1. Well, not a wide receiver 1 per se in fantasy-wise, but a wide receiver 1 on his team who could end up being wide receiver 1 and has been in the past, and that's Allen Robinson. He is back for more after tearing his ACL in Week 1 last year, now in Chicago with the Matt Nagy offense and Mitchell Trubisky throwing him the ball. Could this be Allen Robinson 2.0? I think it's got a good chance, and if he's still there in round 4, Walker sees him on the board without a wide receiver, that's going to be hard to turn down.
I think Eric's definitely looking at Walker right now, pissed that just took his round 4 pick.
Wanted to add to his collection.
The Bears homer, absolutely. Eric Day is a man who keeps his ear to the ground as far as what's hot in today's culture and what is for some reason a household name and for some reason this high in the ADP. I haven't figured it out yet. He's an okay player. He showed some flashes last season. I don't know how he deserves this round 4 ADP, but I'm going to chalk Eric to Juju Smith-Schuster, the number 2 receiver out of Pittsburgh.
He was electric last year, and he didn't see as many targets as some other players going in this sort of area of the draft, but if he can play as well as he did last year and maybe see an uptick in targets with Des Bryant of Pittsburgh being shipped to Des Bryant of Oakland, there's a good chance that Juju could pay off.
God, I forgot Bryant was in Oakland. They just collected all of the league washouts.
It's the retirement squad, baby. Led by John Gruden himself, the king of retirement. Next up, we got Happel. And I think with Happel here, he makes a good sound pick. Nothing flashy, but just a starting caliber running back. And Lamar Miller, who should see a lot of touches in that potentially explosive Houston Texans offense. You know, Miller's best days are probably behind him, but he doesn't have much competition in the backfield and will be a solid RB2 this year. I think Happel will be happy with taking him right there.
I think that's a solid pick from Happel. That would round out his team pretty evenly. Next up, we've got Brock Hayden, who, like I said, might, you never know, approach this draft a little uniquely. I think he's looking right now at the board after drafting 3 running backs and seeing that he desperately needs a receiver, but just doesn't see the talent. I know that he loves shit talking Jarvis Landry, so I don't think Jarvis goes here. I know he loves shit talking Demaryius Thomas, so I don't think DT goes here. He traded him last year for I believe fucking Ravens running back. Who knows?
Please don't.
So I think he's looking elsewhere outside of receiver, knowing he can pick up value next round. And I think seeing QBs coming off the board, Brock Hayden decides to go ahead and grab the last elite one in Tom Brady.
Tommy B and Ben Trudy is shaking in his boots, not knowing that Tom and
freaking
Baum is
out.
back
Tom and Baum disbanded once and for all.
Ben's probably trying to negotiate a trade.
And Brock Hayden would love to.
Yeah.
So maybe not for long, but at least for now, Tom Brady on the squad.
Mason Hoover's up.
What round?
At the end of the 4, start of the 5.
Who do I get?
Mason currently has Zeke, McCaffrey, and Doug Baldwin on his team, and he's looking to
disgusted and sweaty.
He's looking to add another receiver and then a potential flex here.
Mason's trying to give us his pick, but he doesn't realize we're the experts here, and we know him better than he knows himself.
And Mason says he doesn't know much this year, so we're just trying to help him out.
Yeah.
And I think
Emmanuel Sanders in the 4th, right?
Yeah, you could go Emmanuel Sanders here, but I think you pass on Emmanuel Sanders and you go with the target hog Jarvis Landry.
Oh.
He now plays for Cleveland. Jarvis Landry.
Oh, juice.
Talented player, yes. Mason
does
love
juice.
the LSU product, and I think that he would be a very viable number 2 receiver. And then Mason come back in the 5th round looking for his 3rd running back, and I think that he goes with a guy that I'm surprised has fallen this far in this mock.
Yeah, I was looking at him just now. Yep.
Very good player and performed very well last year when he got his touches, and that's Kenyon Drake.
Absolutely.
For Miami. There are talks that Frank Gore could eat into his touches a little bit, and that's maybe why he slips to the 5th round in this draft, where he's been going as high as the late 3rd and mostly in the 4th round in other drafts. But here he is in the early 5th, and Kenyon Drake does not last any longer.
So I think it's finally time on this wraparound for Brock to pick up some wide receiver talent. And now that we're deeper into the draft, I think he sees some names that would look appealing to him. One name that has slipped pretty far down in the 5th round, but I'm surprised ADP sites have him going this low, is Marvin Jones, who had 2 explosive games last season and then regressed a bit, but ended up a pretty solid season under his belt. Brock, who coined the term Starvin' Marvin, is a big fan of his and would love to add him to the squad.
And Marvin would be ready to eat as Brock's wide receiver 1 going into this year.
Absolutely.
Now we've got old Happel back up. Who knows at this point what Happel's thinking. I'm not sure he's made it to the 5th round of any mock draft he's tried this year. He usually gets distracted by the weed by that point. But here we are. Maybe he follows along the path that Ben did last time, and he hears about a receiver in a certain team, and he says, oh man, doesn't he have another good receiver on that team? And Happel jumps back with Golden Tate here, a guy that sees so much volume and is going to be consistent, always finishes in the mid-20s at wide receiver. Not a flashy pick here, but one that's going to get the job done for Austin Happel.
Eric Day, who right now has a decently solid receiver core, and Jordan Howard sitting at RB1. I think he needs to shore up his RB core before the talent depletes after this 5th round. So he is currently looking at a couple different names, a few of them up in the air. I think he goes down, actually, and probably, and this is right in the Eric Day vein of style, I think he goes down and grabs Marshawn Lynch, who I think a lot of people are projecting low for the ceiling that he's looking at this season. I think Oakland, assembling their retirement home squad, actually stands a better chance of producing this season than they did last year. We've got John Gruden coming in, trying to whip things into shape with Spider 2Y Banana, his favorite play. And I think he goes down and grabs Marshawn. I think he sees past the rookie talent and goes for a proven veteran.
There's really nothing wrong with that pick. Marshawn has looked good. He still does have some talent. Whether he has enough juice in the tank to last the whole season as an effective runner remains to be seen. But at this point, everybody left on the board at the running back position comes with question marks. So you might as well go with somebody that you like and somebody that you trust. And Marshawn Lynch fits that bill for old easy day. Now we've got Ben Walker on the board. Walker does already have 2 running backs, but I think because of his already solid 2 running backs, he's willing to roll the dice on a 3rd running back in the form of Mark Ingram. He will be suspended the first 4 games of the season, but had a hell of a year. If the Saints offense is anything like it was last year, Mark Ingram in the 5th round would be a great return on investment.
So Noah is kind of in the same vein here, searching for a receiver to round out his starting running back core. Or not receiver, running back, I'm sorry. And taking Mark Ingram doesn't leave him with a whole lot of options as far as this tier of talent. But kind of in the same vein, I think he takes a risk. And he drafts a first-round pick out of the NFL draft this year, Rashad Penny. I think Rashad, full of potential, working with a finger injury, likely to come back, but he does have the problem of competing with Chris Carson, starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks last year. But I think Rashad will come out on the end this season.
Not a bad pick at all. Definitely a high upside play, and going with 2 rookie running backs as his 2 starting running backs is an interesting strategy, but one that could pay off. As we've seen in years past, running backs have performed very well in their first season in the league. Now Mitch, back to him. You know, he's too busy to watch full games of football, so he'll usually just catch...
Or even highlights.
Yeah, well, he'll usually catch the highlights on SportsCenter at the end of the night.
Red zone in between trips.
And who's the first? Who's the first guy on the highlights every single night after a game of football? It's Cam Newton with that
absolutely
beautiful smile and always soothing voice at the podium,
charisma,
watching him roll through defenders,
fashion
and
sense,
then dab in the end zone. So it makes perfect sense that Cam Newton is the one that goes right here.
And this is a terrible pick, actually, in the 5th round. I think that exactly matches Mitch's drafting strategy.
I think Newton is clearly the best.
Oh, definitely the best quarterback left on the board.
And maybe he would still be there in the next round, but you never know for sure in this league, so you might as well just try to insure your players, and Mitch goes and gets his guy in the 5th round.
Might as well. So next up, we've got you, Brent. This is your pick in the 5th round, and your team is pretty solid so far. You've got DeAndre Hopkins, Devonta Freeman, Tyreek Hill, one of your favorite players in the league, I imagine, and Russell Wilson, a solid quarterback. Like so many others this round, you're looking to round out your starting running back core. And do that, there's a lot of names here, and I think I see one that probably won't be available on the wraparound that maybe you've had your eye on because I've called his name out in the group chat a couple times and you've told me to shut the fuck up and stop giving people tips on good players that are kind of sleepers this year's rookie, Kerryon Johnson. He's a very solid pick this season. In the 5th round is a pretty high asking price for him. He's still got to outcompete a couple of names in Detroit, but I think you see value in him based on what you've said. So
Kerryon definitely might have the best landing spot out of all of the rookie running backs outside of Saquon, just because they have been in a need of a running back for so long, and It looks like they might finally be giving the talented player an opportunity to step up and fill that void. Just as I was sitting with only one running back, so are you, and I think it makes sense why you would go running back here. And you're going to go with a guy that had a good year last year. There's a need for some more weapons in this offense in a normally very strong offense. That's Rex Burkhead for the New England Patriots.
interesting.
With the news of Sony Michel still being injured and behind, Burkhead, while he also is dealing with some injuries, is a proven player in this offense. If he plays anything like he did last year, this would be a great pick as Deion Lewis is out of town and he could have a big year.
Burkhead did show a lot of great mobility and athleticism last year when given the chance. The problem is, like you said, finding the. I don't know if you said that actually. Mason's been distracting me over here, blowing what I assume is mango flavored Juul smoke out in the air. Next up, we got Wilson, who I have drafted. What I would say is probably one of the most solid teams of the draft so far, with Fournette, Melvin Gordon, Adam Thielen, and Larry Fitzgerald. Just 4 solid hitters. I'm going to try to round them out with one more before we sign off here. And I think seeing how solid his running back and wide receiver positions are. What's that? Seeing how solid his running back and receiver core is, I think he takes a chance on the high-flying Evan Ingram, possibly a...
I just threw up in my mouth, Joe.
You don't like Evan Ingram?
No, I would never fucking
Damn!
That's dope.
That's where he's going?
Sign him up.
All right, we're unsigning Wilson from Evan Ingram. We've got
Yeah, that's a strong no.
the input
Try
right here.
again.
He does not like Evan Ingram.
Try again.
So we're just gonna cut this whole bit and give him Flash Gordon. Why not? He's still on the board.
That's better, but still not
Josh
on the mark.
Gordon.
Well, who the fuck would you take, Wilson? Look who's left. It's all garbage. You piece of shit. Who the
That's like taking a phone call. You got such a and all of a sudden you're on Twitter. What are you doing,
Who would you take, Wilson?
First off, I'd
Look at
take-
the list.
Okay,
Look
listen.
at the list.
First, I'd take Jimmy Graham over Evan Ingram if I did take a tight end in the
That's
fucking top
garbage.
5 rounds. Secondly, fucking Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Look at the list. You want
Give me
Golden
Chris
Tate?
Hogan.
Golden
Chris
Tate's already
Hogan
gone.
over Josh
Golden
Gordon.
Tate's
Yep.
already gone.
You're already smoking, dude. Oh,
him to
who'd you give Golden Tate to?
Oh,
Apple.
Oh my God.
Give me Chris Hogan.
All right, Chris Hogan, potentially number 1. Who gives a fuck? Chris Hogan. Shut the fuck up, Wilson. You see how nice of a team I drafted you?
And now,
Fournette, Gordon. All right.
now we got Bench Rudy back on the clock, and he couldn't get Tom to cook up bombs, but you know who's still on the board to cook up some bombs? Dion. Tom and Dion cooking up bombs, and Dion Lewis, he might be in Tennessee
Talk
now.
about a bomb.
But-
Talk about how I just sniped Chris Hogan from Ben.
Shut the fuck
Dion
up,
Lewis
Wilson.
is a freaking pick right here. A solid running back that Ben can make look flexy.
Robbie, last pick of our mock here. I don't know how we haven't given this dude to anybody yet. League veteran, one of the best in the game. Has a new quarterback this year. I'm sure
Jimmy Graham.
It's not Jimmy Graham. I'm sure I'll have plenty of chemistry with him. Robbie
Jimmy
Burns,
Graham.
with the last pick of the mock, selects
Adrian Peterson.
Demarius Thomas to shore up his receiver core here. So that ends the mock draft. Fuck Zach Wilson. I gave you one of the best teams of the mock. Everyone else looking kind of shitty. My team looking pretty terrible. Brent, actually, you probably come out of this mock with one of the more solid teams. You can thank me for that. Who else did I draft? A killer squad. Wow, Noah's team's terrible. So, pretty accurate mock we got going on here.
Wilson with
Any
the best draft and
any closing thoughts, Brent?
You know, about what you expect. The top 3 tight ends off the board,
Yep.
as well as the top 5 quarterbacks.
Yep.
And then just a good mix. Everybody. Running backs went early, but there were a few more wide receivers in the first round than I expected, with 4 wide receivers going in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing crazy stood out. Of course, you know, a lot of ADP is going to be followed in the earlier rounds, but then people are going to start going after their players in 3rd and 4th and 5th round,
Yeah.
and that's shown here. So I think that this is realistic. Obviously, it won't be like this on draft day with everybody having their own opinions and
And
stuff.
just being blackout by noon.